On the night of my birthday, I found a box at my door. What was hidden inside it would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we continue, please subscribe to Revenge with John and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to the night it all began. My name is Quinn. I turned 25 this year. You'd think birthdays are a time for celebration, but in my family, they had become a reminder of just how far I had been pushed away. When I told them years ago that I wasn't going to follow the family's carefully drawn path, law school like my father, or finance like my brother, they looked at me as if I'd spat in their faces. Teaching? Writing? That's not a real career, my mother had hissed. Do you want to throw your life away? My father added, shaking his head. From that day forward, every family dinner became a battlefield. My choices were mocked, my achievements ignored. They acted as though I was the family embarrassment, the one they'd rather not mention when neighbors asked how their children were doing. The only person who never judged me was my grandfather. When everyone else turned their backs, he kept his door open. I spent long evenings helping him with errands, cooking for him, and just sitting by his side as his health declined. He told me stories about his youth, about honor, about how family should mean loyalty, not control. When he passed, I thought at least I'd have his memory to hold on to. But what I didn't realize was that my parents had taken even more from me than love. They had taken the truth. Despite everything, a part of me still hoped that things could change. That maybe, just maybe, if I reached out, they'd soften. So a week before my birthday, I called my mother. Mom. I was thinking of having a small dinner, I said carefully, bracing myself for her response. Just the family. Nothing big. I'd really like you all to come. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp exhale. Quinn, don't set yourself up for disappointment, she said flatly. We're very busy. You know how things are. Busy. That was always the excuse. Busy with work. Busy with my brother's promotions. Busy with my sister's perfect life. Too busy for me. I hung up feeling that familiar sting in my chest. But I still set the table. I still baked a cake. Because even after all these years, some foolish part of me wanted to believe they'd walk through that door. The night came. The candles burned low. The cake sat untouched in the middle of the table. One by one, the hours passed. Midnight arrived, and I was alone, again. I was blowing out the candles by myself when I heard it. A faint thud at the door. I hurried over, heart racing. The hallway was empty, but on the ground sat a small square box. Old. Worn. Wrapped in twine. And across the top, written in familiar ink, was my name, Quinn. My breath caught. The handwriting was unmistakable. My grandfather's. I carried it inside, my hands trembling. I set it on the table beside the forgotten cake. Slowly, I pulled at the twine. The lid creaked open. Inside lay a brass key, gleaming faintly under the candlelight. Beneath it, an envelope with my name scrawled across it in the same hand. My chest tightened. The room felt smaller, heavier, as if the air itself knew what was about to unfold. And in that moment I realized, this box held the answers to why my family had kept me at a distance. I took a deep breath, reached for the envelope, and prepared to learn the truth. The moment I opened that envelope, I understood why my family never wanted me near grandfather's house. The envelope trembled in my hands. For a long moment, I just stared at it, afraid of what it might reveal. Then I tore it open. Inside were several yellowed pages, folded carefully. The first was a letter, written in my grandfather's familiar, slanted handwriting. My dearest Quinn. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. I want you to know that in my final years, your kindness and presence meant more to me than anything else. You were the only one who sat with me, the only one who listened. The others were too busy chasing their own ambitions, but you gave me something no one else did, time. For that, you deserve the truth. My throat tightened as I read those words. I could almost hear his voice in my ear. The next page was official. A legal document. My heart pounded as I scanned the text. It was his last will and testament. And there it was, in black ink, everything, his house, his land, his savings, even his collection of heirlooms, was left entirely to me. My stomach dropped. So it was true. He had left everything to me. But if that was the case, then why had no one told me? Why had I been kept away from the house after his death? Why did my parents tell me the lawyer had nothing important for me to see? I flipped through the other pages. Receipts. Notes. And then, photocopies of legal filings. I gasped. These weren't just papers. They were proof that someone had intentionally hidden the will. I read my father's signature. My mother's handwriting in the margins. They had gone to court, claiming that the will was contested, that grandfather wasn't of sound mind. But I knew better. I had been with him every single day in his final months. He had never been clearer. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. All these years, I thought they had just drifted away because they disapproved of me. But this was betrayal. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had stolen from me. The brass key on the table caught the candlelight again, and suddenly I understood. It must be to the house. The one I had been locked out of since the funeral. The one they told me was under renovation, or sold. Lies. All lies. My hands curled into fists. For the first time in years, I felt not just sorrow but rage. I looked again at the letter. The last line chilled me. Do not let them take what is rightfully yours. This key will open the door to the truth. Trust yourself, Quinn. I closed my eyes, clutching the key so tight it dug into my palm. For the first time in a long time, I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I would go to that house. And whatever I found inside would expose everything my family had tried to bury. When I turned the key in the lock of grandfather's house, I realized this place had been kept from me for a reason. The morning air was cold, sharp, almost biting as I stood at the gate of my grandfather's house. I hadn't been here in years, not since the funeral. Back then, when I asked to enter, my parents told me it was being renovated. Another time, they said it had already been sold. Lies. All of it. Now the heavy brass key weighed in my pocket like a secret finally ready to be revealed. I hesitated only for a moment before slipping it into the old lock. The tumblers turned smoothly, as if the door had been waiting for me. The house creaked as I stepped inside. Dust floated in the morning light streaming through the windows, illuminating the furniture still draped in white sheets. The air smelled of cedar and old books, and for an instant, it was as if I could hear my grandfather humming in the study, just as he used to. My chest tightened. This was his house. Not my parents'. Not my siblings'. His. And he had wanted it to be mine. I walked slowly, my fingers trailing along the walls. Every corner of this house held a memory. Afternoons spent listening to his stories on the porch. Late nights playing chess. The smell of his pipe tobacco lingering in the halls. My parents never cared for these things, never valued them. To them, this house was just property. To me, it was home. The study drew me in like a magnet. The door was half closed, as though waiting for me to push it open. Inside, the shelves were stacked with books, their spines cracked and worn. Papers littered the desk, though covered in a fine layer of dust. That's when I noticed the locked drawer. It was small, tucked at the side of the desk, the keyhole glinting faintly in the dim light. I pulled out the brass key, my heart pounding. Slowly, I slid it in. It fit perfectly. With a soft click, the drawer opened. Inside were folders, neatly arranged. And on top, a leather-bound notebook. My grandfather's handwriting sprawled across the first page, personal journal. My hands shook as I opened it. His words leapt from the page, raw and unfiltered. I am disappointed in my children. They visit me only when they want something. Money. Favors. Nothing more. They argue over what I will leave behind, but never ask how I feel. The only one who cares, truly cares, is Quinn. She brings me tea. She sits with me when I am in pain. She listens. She gives me her time. That is worth more than gold. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed a hand over my mouth, holding back a sob. I turned the pages, each entry cutting deeper. He wrote about how my parents constantly pressured him to sign documents, to adjust his will. How they ignored his wishes when he told them he wanted me to have the house. How they dismissed him when he spoke of fairness. And then the final entry. My breath caught as I read. Quinn, if you are reading this, then they have tried to deceive you. Know that my will is real. The house, the land, the savings, they are yours. Do not let them strip you of what is rightfully yours. You were my true family, and this home is proof. If they kept you from it, they did so out of greed. Do not be afraid. The truth is on your side. The journal slipped from my hands onto the desk. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was the truth, written in my grandfather's own words. My parents had hidden this from me. They had stolen my inheritance, my birthright. They had erased me from his story, hoping I would simply fade into the background. But I wouldn't. Not anymore. I gathered the journal, the folders, and the documents into a bag. As I locked the door behind me, I looked back one last time. The house stood tall, proud, waiting for its rightful owner to claim it. Walking down the path, I felt something burning inside me. A fire I hadn't felt in years. For so long I'd been the forgotten daughter, the disappointment, the one they dismissed. But now, I had the proof. They thought they could silence me. They thought they could bury the truth. But the next time I saw them, I would make sure they remembered exactly who I was. And I wouldn't be walking away quietly. When I told my mother I'd be bringing an attorney to our little chat, she laughed. By sunset, she wasn't laughing. I didn't sleep after leaving grandfather's house. I spread the journal, the photocopies, the receipts, and the will across my kitchen table and worked like a surgeon, sorting, labeling, scanning. Originals went into a fresh manila envelope. Scans were backed up twice. The brass key I strung on a cord and wore around my neck. If my family wanted to pretend I didn't exist, they were about to meet the version of me they'd ignored for years, organized, stubborn, and very, very done. By 8 a.m., I had an appointment with a probate attorney, Maya Harrow, a sharp-eyed woman who listened more than she spoke. I slid the envelope to her. She put on thin reading glasses and read silently. Page after page. The only sound was the soft click of her pen. Finally, she looked up. These aren't just suspicions, Quinn. This is a roadmap. The will names you sole beneficiary. The journal documents intent. And these filings, she tapped the photocopies. Show your parents temporarily petition the court as if no valid will existed. They'll say capacity was in question, but the notary and witnesses here undercut that. She turned to the last page. You even have the notary's seal and registry number. My heartbeat crawled up into my throat. So they hid it. They tried, Maya said. Step 1, we get certified copies of the will from the clerk. Step 2, we file a notice to the court and place a lease pendens on any property they've attempted to move. Step 3, we send your parents a formal demand. After that, we talk reality. What's reality? That they can return what isn't theirs, or meet us in court. We left her office like a small storm. At the courthouse, the clerk's stamp thudded onto crisp paper, certified true copy, and for the first time since grandfather died, the truth felt heavier than their lies. I tucked the certified will behind the original like a shield. On the courthouse steps, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Quinn, I'm in the middle of something. I'm sure you are, I said calmly. I'd like to meet tonight. You, Dad, and Evan. 7 o'clock. Café Linden. There was a beat of silence, then that cool, familiar scoff. We don't have time to entertain your dramas. Maya, standing beside me, wrote 2 words on her notepad and held it up. Stay calm. I breathed. It isn't a drama, Mom. It's about grandfather's estate. Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Quinn, that's all been handled. Not by me, I said. 7 o'clock. A faint scrape, like her palm covering the receiver. A muffled whisper, a male voice in the background, and then she was back. Fine. Briefly. The line went dead. Maya slid a sealed envelope into my hand. Our demand letter. You'll place it on the table. Don't argue evidence. Don't explain. Just state facts and invites. I'll be nearby if they escalate. Nearby. I frowned. She smiled. Think of me as your shadow. The afternoon stretched tight as wire. I reread grandfather's last entry until the ink might as well have been carved into me. Do not let them take what is rightfully yours. Trust yourself, Quinn. Every cell in my body answered, I do. At 6:58, Café Linden's bell chimed as I stepped inside. The air smelled like burnt sugar and citrus peel. My family already sat at a corner table, carefully posed for control. Dad at the head, Evan on the left, my mother angled in a way that let her see both me and the door. She wore a smile that wasn't a smile. 2 minutes late, she said. As usual. I checked my watch, then set my bag down. Right on time. Dad didn't bother with pleasantries. Let's get to it. You asked for this meeting. I did. I took the seat opposite him and placed the sealed envelope gently in the center of the table. Evan rolled his eyes. You invited us for stationery? Stationery, I corrected softly, and slid the envelope closer. My hands were steady. Inside is a letter from my attorney. It references a will, grandfather's will, naming me the sole beneficiary of his home, land, savings, and heirlooms. It includes notice of the certified copy filed at the clerk's office this morning, and our intent to place a lease pendens on any property you've attempted to move under temporary administration. My mother blinked slowly, as if trying to decide which mask to wear. Quinn, your grandfather was unwell. He said things he didn't mean at the end. I reached into my bag and, without a word, laid grandfather's leather journal beside the envelope. The ribbon marker hung like a quiet verdict. Dad's jaw ticked. This is outrageous. What's outrageous, I said evenly, is the petition you filed acting as though no valid will existed. The court will see otherwise. Evan leaned back, spreading his hands. And what exactly do you want? For a moment, the cafe noise, cups clinking, a steamer hissing, swelled and then fell away. I saw us as if from above, the part they'd cast me in for years and the person I had become. Their disappointment. Grandfather's choice. I want what's mine, I said. And I want you to stop pretending you didn't know. My mother's smile finally cracked. You wouldn't take this to court. Think about your career. Your reputation. There it was. The old hook. The old shame. I almost laughed. I said. And I've also thought about grandfather drinking cold tea alone while you counted rooms and argued signatures. I tapped the envelope. This is me choosing not to be erased. Dad reached for the letter. Before you open it, I added, one more thing. I placed a small voice recorder beside the journal. For everyone's clarity, I'm recording any discussions about the estate from now on. All three of them stilled. Evan's bravado slipped an inch. The bell over the cafe door chimed again. I didn't have to turn to know Maya had just walked in. I felt the air shift when she spotted our table and took a seat by the window, within sight, within reach. My mother's eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. You planned this. I prepared, I said. Dad tore the envelope open. His eyes scanned, narrowed, hardened. When he reached the signature block, his mouth flattened into a thin white line. He set the letter down like it had burned him. He cleared his throat. We'll review and respond. Maya's reflection in the window lifted her phone. A message vibrated in my pocket. Good. Don't fill the silence. Let them sit with it. So I did. I sat very still and let my family feel the teeth of paper. After a long minute, my mother reached for the journal with a trembling hand. This is private. It was, I said, until you made it a weapon. She flinched, and then the mask snapped back into place. Leave those here, Dad said, tapping the journal and letter like he still owned the table, the cafe, the street outside. We'll need to. No, I said, calmly sliding both back into my bag. You'll get copies through counsel. I stood. The recorder's red light glowed softly. You have until Friday to acknowledge the will and return control of the properties. After that, we file. Evan pushed back his chair. You're bluffing. I met his eyes and smiled the smallest smile. Am I? The bell chimed again as I walked out into the evening, Maya falling into step beside me. How do you feel? She asked. I looked down at the cord around my neck, at the brass key catching the last light of day. Like I finally turned the right one, I said. When I walked into the courtroom, my family thought they still had control. By the time we left, they finally understood, I wasn't their silent shadow anymore. The courthouse smelled like old wood and dusted paper, the kind of place where truth and lies collide under fluorescent lights. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I followed Maya toward the courtroom doors. In my bag were copies of the will, grandfather's journal, and the certified filings. On my chest, the brass key hung beneath my blouse, warm for my skin, as if it had been waiting for this day. My parents were already there. My father in a pressed suit, my mother wearing pearls like armor, and Evan sitting stiffly beside them. They didn't look at me at first. But when they did, my mother's eyes narrowed, sharp as glass. "You don't belong here," she hissed under her breath as I passed. I met her gaze without blinking. "Neither do you." The bailiff called the room to order, and we all stood as the judge entered. A tall man with gray hair and eyes that didn't miss a detail. He adjusted his glasses, shuffled the papers on his bench, and cleared his throat. "This is the matter of the estate of Walter Keaton," he began. "Contested will." Maya rose first, calm and precise. "Your Honor, this is not a matter of contest. This is a matter of concealment. We have in our possession the original notarized will of Walter Keaton, leaving all properties and accounts to his granddaughter Quinn Keaton. We also have certified copies filed with this court." She placed the folder on the table with a quiet authority that filled the room. My father stood next, his voice steady but his hands betraying a tremor. "Your Honor, my late father was not of sound mind. He was manipulated. The will cannot stand." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have medical testimony to support incapacity?" Silence. My father shuffled papers he didn't have. Maya slid forward a new document. "We have notarized statements from 2 witnesses who observed the signing. We also have Mr. Keaton's handwritten journals from the last 6 months of his life. If I may direct your attention to page 32. The bailiff carried the leather journal to the judge. I watched as he read silently, lips tightening. Then he read aloud. "My children care only for my money. Quinn is the only one who visits, who helps me, who gives me her time. She deserves everything. If they try to deny her, it will be proof of their greed." The courtroom shifted with murmurs. My mother's face drained of color. Evan stared at the table, jaw clenched. The judge looked over his glasses at my parents. "How do you answer that?" My mother's mask cracked. He was confused. He didn't know what he was writing. Maya rose again, her voice like steel. "Your Honor, confusion does not produce coherent entries over months of time. Nor does it explain their petition to the court filed immediately after his passing, falsely claiming no will existed." She laid down the photocopies with their signatures. My father's. My mother's. In bold ink. The judge's gavel struck once. "Order." For the first time, I felt the weight shift. It wasn't just me fighting anymore, the truth itself was pressing down on them. Then came my turn. Maya placed a hand on my arm. "Be steady. Speak from the heart." I stood, walked to the front, and faced the judge. My throat was dry, but I forced my voice steady. "Your Honor, my grandfather wasn't confused. He was lonely. And he was ignored. My parents came only to demand signatures or talk about money. I came because I loved him. I was there when he was in pain. I cooked for him. I read to him. I held his hand when he couldn't sleep. He left me everything because I gave him what they didn't, time." The room was silent. Even the air felt heavy. I turned slightly, meeting my parents' eyes. And for years, they made me believe I wasn't enough. That I didn't deserve to be part of this family. But I was there. And they weren't. That's the truth. The judge tapped his pen against the desk, deep in thought. Finally, he leaned back. "I will review the testimony, the journal, and the filings. This court will reconvene in 1 week to issue my decision." The gavel struck. Adjourned. The room broke into fragments of noise, papers shuffled, chairs scraped. But my parents didn't move. My mother's pearls trembled against her neck, her hand shaking. My father's face was stone, but his eyes betrayed panic. As I gathered my papers, Maya whispered, "That went better than expected. You did exactly what you needed to do." But I hardly heard her. My heart still thundered. Because as much as I wanted victory, I knew this wasn't over. My parents weren't the kind to surrender quietly. And when I glanced back, I saw it. the way Evan leaned toward my father, whispering, their eyes sharp and desperate. They had another plan. I thought the courtroom would scare them into silence. I was wrong. They were only getting started. The week before the next hearing felt like living inside a storm. Every day, new whispers reached me, whispers that all carried my family's fingerprints. At work, colleagues glanced sideways when I walked in. Conversations hushed the moment I entered the break room. Finally, one friend pulled me aside. "Quinn, Evan stopped by yesterday." My stomach dropped. "What did he say?" She looked uneasy. She lowered her voice, unstable. "That you've been obsessed with grandfather's estate. That you forged documents." The word burned. Forged. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. This was Evan's specialty, poisoning the well before I even arrived to drink from it. Later that evening, I stopped by the grocery store near my old neighborhood. Whispers followed me there too. Two women near the produce aisle eyed me, shaking their heads. One of them muttered, "Such a shame, after everything her parents did for her." I froze. My mother's voice echoed behind those words. She had clearly begun her own campaign, painting herself as the victim. To outsiders, she was the loving parent dragged into court by an ungrateful daughter. To me, she was the architect of betrayal. By the time I left the store, I could hardly breathe. They weren't just fighting me in court, they were trying to isolate me, to make me doubt myself. That night, Maya called. "They're not going to stop, Quinn," she said flatly. "And it gets worse." She emailed me a PDF. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a scanned last will and testament, dated 3 days before grandfather's death. In it everything, house, accounts, land, was left to my parents. "They're preparing to present this as a late-discovered will," Maya said. "It's clumsy, but dangerous. The signature doesn't match exactly, the date conflicts with notarized filings, and the paper watermark isn't from the year printed. But in court, even a forgery like this can drag things out for months, even years." I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. They forged his will. Or paid someone to. Either way, it's fraud. But proving it will be a battle. They're gambling that you'll give up rather than fight this for years. I pressed my forehead into my hand, the weight of it all crushing me. First the loneliness. Then the lies. Now the smear campaign and a forged document. How many ways could a family betray their own blood? For a moment, I almost believed them, almost let the old doubts creep back in. Maybe I wasn't strong enough. Maybe I didn't belong anywhere. And then my eyes fell on grandfather's journal, still resting on my desk, open to the last page. "Do not let them take what is rightfully yours. Trust yourself." The words anchored me. And then like a spark, I remembered my secret. Weeks before his death, I had filmed him. Not for legal purposes, not for evidence, just because he asked me to record him telling a story about his youth. In that video, time-stamped and dated, he spoke about many things. But near the end, he had looked into the camera, smiled, and said something that now rang louder than any court ruling. "And Quinn, when I'm gone, you'll have this house. I want you to know it's yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I had kept the video on a backup drive, never showing it to anyone. Until now. The forged will no longer terrified me. Because I had the one thing they couldn't fake, his voice, his face, his intent, captured forever. I closed my laptop, sat back, and let out a slow breath. "They want war." I whispered into the empty room. "Then war it is." When they placed the forged will on the judge's bench, they thought it was over. But the truth had a voice, and that voice was louder than all their lies. The second hearing was packed. A week of whispers, rumors, and poison had turned this case into theater. Reporters sat in the back rows, neighbors slipped into benches, and even distant relatives filled the gallery. My parents thrived on performance. Of course they wanted an audience. Evan walked into the courtroom first, chest puffed, a smug grin stretched across his face. He carried a slim leather briefcase, which I knew held the weapon they thought would bury me, the forged will. My mother trailed behind him, already dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. My father, stiff and severe, gave a curt nod to the bailiff as though he owned the place. I sat quietly at my table beside Maya, my hands folded. The brass key rested against my collarbone like a silent anchor. "All rise," the bailiff called, and the judge entered. His eyes were sharp, watchful. He had no patience for theatrics. "Proceed," he said. My father rose smoothly. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, we move to submit an updated testament, dated 3 days before my father's passing. This will supersede the earlier draft and leaves the estate in rightful hands, his immediate children." Evan practically strutted as he placed the document before the judge. My mother sniffled loudly for effect, whispering about poor father's confusion as though on cue. The judge studied the document. "Interesting. Late discovery. We will examine it." Maya stood. Calm, steady. "Your Honor, we ask the court to note the irregularities. The watermark on this paper did not exist until the following year. The notary listed here passed away months before the date. And the signature, when compared with verified records, reveals inconsistencies." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge narrowed his eyes. "That is concerning." But my father pressed on, voice hard. "With respect, opposing counsel is reaching this." For a moment, tension filled the air. The judge weighed both sides, his expression unreadable. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Then Maya placed a hand on my arm. "Quinn," she whispered, "it's time." I rose, clutching the small drive I had carried in my bag for weeks. My legs trembled as I stepped forward. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I would like to present one final piece of evidence. A personal recording, time-stamped and dated, made in my grandfather's home weeks before his passing. It is in his own words, unedited." The judge motioned. "Proceed." The bailiff connected the drive. The screen flickered to life. And there he was. My grandfather, sitting in his old armchair, sunlight spilling through the window. His voice filled the courtroom, warm and unmistakable. "And Quinn, when I'm gone, you'll have this house. I want you to know it's yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Gasps erupted around the room. My mother's handkerchief fell from her fingers. Evan went pale. My father's jaw locked, but even he couldn't mask the tremor in his hands. The judge leaned forward, eyes unblinking. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of my grandfather's words sink into every corner of the courtroom. Then he spoke. "This court finds the late discovered will fraudulent and without merit. The notarized will stands. The estate of Walter Keaton belongs solely to Quinn Keaton. Furthermore, this court refers the matter of forged documents to the district attorney's office for investigation." The gavel struck. Bang. It was over. The gallery buzzed with whispers, but I didn't hear them. All I heard was grandfather's voice echoing in my chest. The truth had spoken, and it had been louder than their lies. As I gathered my papers, my parents sat frozen. My mother's tears had dried to salt on her cheeks. Evan wouldn't look at me. My father's eyes burned with fury, but beneath it was something else, fear. I walked past them without a word, the brass key warm against my skin. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight was blinding. Maya smiled, tucking the journal back into my bag. "You did it," she said. "No," I whispered. "We did. He and I." I tilted my head toward the sky, imagining grandfather watching. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt whole. To you listening now, I'll tell you this: family can betray you deeper than anyone else. They can steal, they can lie, they can try to erase you. But don't let them. Trust yourself. Hold on to the truth. Because the truth, once spoken, can never be silenced. Backhand index pointing right, and if it were you, would you forgive them, or would you walk away forever? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with John for more stories like this.